Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We're from theniche-case.com, where you can read all sorts of Aotearoa sporting information. Got a fresh yarn about the Silver Ferns World Cup squad. Really interested in what the All Blacks are doing. That's a joke. We don't cover those sports. But you can read about the Aotearoa New Zealand Warriors. You can read about the All Whites. You can read about Kiwi cricketers overseas. And if you're really fiending for Stephen Adams information, you're missing a bit of Stephen Adams in your life. You can read about Stephen Adams on the website as well, and any of our other bits and bobs that we do cover on our website, theniche-case.com. We don't try and do everything. We just do whatever we want to do. And hopefully you're out there doing whatever you want to do as well. Earlier in the week, we've got the Variety Show podcast, which is a hard and fast smorgasbord of Aotearoa sporting topics, touching on stuff that happened over the weekend. And prior to the Variety Show, every week we record our Patreon podcast, which is just a bit of background information from our niche case sporting realms. The Patreon podcast is there for the Patreon whānau who support and donate to the niche case every month. And that is just one of the ways you can support the niche case straight up the guts. Patreon.com/our niche case EL. Niche case, you get an extra podcast there. Otherwise, you can buy us a coffee. There's a website for that. Just make a one-off donation if you please. Buy me a coffee/the niche case. Those are the ways you can financially support the niche case, or you can just read the website and have a little gaze at the ads and all that good stuff. Those are ways you can financially support the niche case. Not everyone can do that. We understand. All good. Your presence is more than enough. You're here listening to this. You're here watching this. Maybe you checked the website today. Big up yourself. Appreciate you. Appreciate everyone supporting the niche case on all sorts of levels. We're here for you. We're trying to do our best, and we appreciate your support. Patreon whānau, big up you. Big up everyone who has bought us a coffee, bought us a cup of tea, and everyone who checks our mahi every week as well, all of which comes together in the email newsletter that we send out every Monday and Friday evening. That is via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. We do have a couple of paid subscriptions on Substack as well. We don't have anything to offer. We might develop some sort of paid Substack feed in the future, but that's another way to financially support the niche case. It's a bit all over the show as far as the donations and the financial support. There's just a bunch of different options. However you want to do it, we just kind of have it all there for you. You can do what you want if you can. That's all good. But those email newsletters are completely free. They come out every Monday and Friday. We write things about New Zealand sport specifically for every email newsletter. There's links to all the stuff we have written for our website. They are in that email newsletter, and all the podcast information is there as well. So sign up thenichecase.substack.com, and that is just niche case sent straight to you. Pretty easy. And we've got a nice little community on the Substack building as well. That's the housekeeping. Let's take it further. Let's hit a neck level with a bit of mindfulness. What do you got?
Yeah, here's a doozy from Carl Jung, who said, "What we neglect in ourselves blends itself secretly into our actions towards others." And then second part of that is, through uniting with the self, we reach the God.
Can you repeat that first part?
Yeah, I was going to say I might need to repeat that. What we neglect in ourselves blends itself secretly into our actions towards others. This is the important bit.
Yeah, it's hard to love yourself fully and then be a bit of a dickhead to other people.
Yes. Yeah. It kind of is. Like, it's because that's the sort of like wellspring of where your behavior stems from, is that relationship to yourself. And if you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and start taking it out on other people, that's one example of that. If you are a happy, contented, psychologically well nourished person, you're probably going to be nice to folks as well. Like there's kind of a direct correlation between them things. Then that second bit is probably that's Carl Jung, so this is getting like deep psychology stuff that's probably well beyond my pay grade. But I mean, through uniting with the self, we reach the God sounds like one of them things of like getting closer to the core of life and existence and reality and them things. And therefore, if you act in accordance with that, you will also be acting in a way that whatever the opposite of that neglecting in ourselves actions towards other stuff is. But that's
What
Carl Jung, so he's we can't psychoanalyze a master psychoanalyst.
the second bit you've just added in there is like a sprinkle of like doozy dust just to add a bit of spark to it. But the first bit is the most
The first
important
bit's the juice, yep.
because if you are working on loving yourself and being a better person and having a better relationship with yourself, that opens you up to empathy for others. So when someone does a shitty thing to you, you can execute empathy, and instead of responding to a shitty act, some sort of negativity with like, yeah, whatever, mate, blah, 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 rah, rah, rah. You can, because you love yourself, because you're working on your relationship with yourself, you can just deploy empathy and nullify the situation. You can respond with gratitude. You can respond with generosity. You can respond with a more positive action, but that comes from your relationship with yourself. Let's get into some Aotearoa sporting matters. We've got probably a really big rugby league section for this podcast today. Warriors taking on Raiders, and Kiwi NRL matters. We've got plenty of time and space to dive into the New Zealand NBL, where apparently Corey Webster, he's in the NBL. He's joined the Canterbury Rams. And if I was a Kiwi basketballer, I'd just wait halfway through the season and join a team that's doing pretty well. Like that seems like the best route into the NBL transfer market. So we do have the meat of this podcast will be rugby league and basketball. Do you have a couple of like things just to keep an eye on? The All Whites. No, also do a better segue than that. We got Pro League hockey. That is next weekend. So just jot that down in your diary. The Black Sticks are going over to Europe, men's and women's, and they are going to take on Argentina and Belgium. I'm really interested in this because neither Black Sticks team is very good, and they'll probably lose a lot of those games. So I'm just assessing and gauging my intuition about Black Sticks hockey. We also have county championship cricket. That's starting this weekend. As we discussed on our Patreon podcast, Henry Shipley has signed with Sussex, and he is playing Division 2. So Henry Shipley is probably going to be joining Ajaz Patel, playing county championship cricket in Division 2 this weekend. And then we've got the Lancashire crew, which is probably Daryl Mitchell, Will Williams, maybe Con de Gronholm. They're going to be playing Division 1. Old mate, what's his face? Matt Henry is probably in action as well. I think off the top of my head, he's playing for Hampshire, sorry. So Matt Henry will be back in action, but county championship cricket starts again this weekend. Obviously, they love a bit of T20 100 cricket in England, so it's a bit tricky keeping up with the schedules, but that's on my radar as well. And we've got the All Whites, as I dropped there. The All Whites are playing games next weekend, and we've had a squad announcement. And I'm curious, after discussing a little bit about the All Whites squad in our Patreon podcast when that news was fresh, do you have like a point of focus or a point of intrigue about this All White squad that you have sat with over the last few days? We will dive into previews and analysis and insights for these Kiwi sporting things next week. But just right now, what is something that has sat with you about the All White squad over the last few days?
Yeah, the more I looked at the squad, and when you like factor in things like Chris Wood's out injured, we knew he was going to be out injured. Sarpreet Singh and Ryan Thomas aren't available yet. They're sort of still managing themselves on the way back from injury, having just finished their seasons. They wanted rest, fair enough. I think Singh as well probably is in a position where he's like, it's a little bit of a pivotal time in his career where he's had a bad loan out and he almost got a permanent transfer to Werder Bremen last year and would be probably hopeful of getting something permanent again this summer, this European summer, and therefore, you kind of can't risk getting injured or else his career's in a bit of a stink place. It's like it's understandable. It's a little bit like they could have played, but also they weren't there last time, so nothing's changed in that regard. So if you sort of factor out those three, who might be their three best players, by the way, so there is a little bit of that. But like beyond that, most of the debates about the squad are about backup stuff. Like the rest of the expected starters are there, right? And I was thinking of it from that perspective because if you look at the squad, like why isn't Storm Rue or James McGarry or whoever there after winning the A League the other week? It's like, well, James McGarry's not there because Liberato Kakacha is better than him, and they pick someone else more versatile to be the backup. It's not because McGarry's a bad player. It's not because he's not one of the 23 best players necessarily. It's just you've got to pick a squad. Storm Rue, a little bit unlucky, but it's also like I don't think he would have been a starter. I think Callan Elliott and Tim Payne are ahead of him there, and so you're going to pick another right back. Probably not. Dane Ingham got dropped as well. It's not just Storm Rue. So from those perspectives, it's not like I say, all the frisky bits about the squad are mostly just backup fringe areas, which is not a bad place to be. And but thinking of it from that first 11 perspective and trying to fit a starting 11 out of this team, suddenly it's like, well, who starts up front? Max Mata, Ben Waine, Alex Grieve, all contending for one spot. Can you fit a midfield that has Garbett, Stamenic, and Joe Bell, and also a number 10 like Marco Rojas or Callum McCoward or Eli Just? Like you can't fit all those guys into the team, which is the 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 point I came away from writing about it, which was the most interesting and also intriguing aspect of it, is it felt like there's some depth here. Like there's not just depth in terms of like picking a 23, but there's actually depth in terms of picking an 11 as well. And it's not across the board. I think that they'd like to have a better option, like a more secure option at right back. I think goalkeeper is still a position that's a little bit up in the air as well. But Matt Garbett scored the most recent goal for the All Whites. He came off the bench to do that. Like there's an example of someone who was a pretty good player, had to start on the bench in that game, came on, impacted positively, scored a goal, they won 2-1. That's that having that kind of thing. It's important in all football, it's important in all sports that have substitutions, but in particular, I think international football, to be able to have the kind of depth on the bench to change a game midway through, because international football is tricky. Like you don't get longer than a week or so normally preparing for these games. You don't get the opportunity to scout the opponents as much as you would like. You're not playing that week in, week out rhythm. It can be hard to get that stuff right. And to be able to change things midway through a game is huge. And the All Whites haven't really ever been in a position to do that before. They've had some good starting 11s in the past, haven't necessarily had the thing to been able to like, okay, 60 minutes gone, we're down 1-0, we're going to change things. We're going to bring on a winger who, instead of cutting in, is going to run at the line and take you on. We're going to chuck a tall fella. Well, the tall fella up front's already starting, but maybe Chris Wood gets injured. Okay, we'll change the thing. We Alex Grieve running in behind. Alex Grieve, movement off the ball kind of thing. Like there's a bit of that coming through for the All Whites, and it's because most of these guys as well are relatively young players, only in their first few years as professionals. That depth should get better. Like that depth should get better and better the longer we go along, and more players will be joining this crew from younger waves as well, and whatever might happen there. Like it's this depth should only get better, but we're starting to now see it to a point where it's like, yeah, the Whites are in a decent place here. I don't know what that means in terms of their standing in international football because they haven't played enough good teams for us to be able to get a gauge on that. But hopefully that's the next step as we start to see what these guys can do against better opponents. And start Sweden and Qatar in a week and a half or whatever it is. We'll see how that one goes.
As I seem to say most weeks, that is not a specific thing to football.
Definitely not. Yeah.
That is the same as we've discussed about the Black Caps over the last few years. We're seeing it with the Aotearoa Kiwis and the depth on offer there. I'd say most of the women's codes are going to be hitting that zone as well. Like we're NRLW, you're seeing as many new players to NRLW as you're seeing returning players. That means the depth for the Kiwi Ferns is doubling, factoring in how those players might also represent Samoa or Tonga as women's rugby league grows. So I think, basketball, we're trying to build out a Tall Blacks squad that we've talked about a few times. And as we'll get into later on, there's no shortage of Kiwi basketball players either. So I think a lot of these codes, and that's the niche case agenda, right? Joked about at the top of the show, Silver Ferns, All Blacks, whatever. All these other sports we talk about, the depth is going crazy because those sports are going crazy as well, growing in popularity, and the talent on display continues to increase. Also seems to be evident at the Warriors.
Yeah,
the Warriors
it does.
Have a debutant, and I'll just offer some background here about Ali Leiataua before cracking into the preview against the Raiders. Leiataua comes in at centre. Obviously, there's all the basic stuff that, he's the nephew of Ali Lauatiti, all this stuff.
Is he the nephew of Ali Lauatiti?
Apparently.
Oh, there we go.
Who cares about his parents? But, he's
they're the ones who raised him, but whatever.
He's the nephew. Really good young talent, and obviously there is plenty of young talent coming through the Warriors system. He's the second player from the Redcliffe under-21s team, who has already played NRL for the Warriors this season, along with Dimitris Sifakula. They both played in the under-21s final last year, and now they've are going to make NRL debuts after commanding the opportunity through their reserve grade performances. Sifakula was really good in New South Wales Cup before making his debut. Leiataua was really good in New South Wales Cup as well. And I want to remind folks, because as I said on the Variety Show, there was that Valence Tafade hype with the Dolphins coming back to Auckland. Leiataua has been really dominant in New South Wales Cup. The same way Junior Ponga was really dominant in New South Wales Cup before appearing on the wing for the Roosters. Same way Dean Mariner was dominant in Queensland Cup before making his debut for the Broncos. Same way Will Warbrick was dominant in Queensland Cup before making his debut for the Storm. Same way Keanu Kinney has been dominating Queensland Cup for Burleigh before making his debut for the Titans. We love Valence Tafade, Valence the House. He's a South Aucklander. He's a big man ting. He's doing fantastic. Is not as much unique about him as a lot of other people are making it appear. Dean Mariner's just as good. Will Warbrick is just as good. Keanu Kinney is just as good. Given what Ali Leiataua has done in New South Wales Cup, he might be just as good as well. He's a high pedigree junior. He played, he's a rugby league junior, which is somewhat notable. There is a link with Rocco Berry, Viliami Vailea, Adam Pompey, because they all played first 15 rugby and they're all competing for centre roles. I wrote about that a few years ago. Leiataua was the only one with an actual rugby league background before he went to King's College and played first 15. He played, on YouTube you can watch the Papatoe under 15s versus Marist under 15s. Marist had Dean Mariner. Papatoe had Ali Leiataua. Ali Leiataua was playing centre in that final. Then he went to midfield for King's College first 15. Then he was playing fullback for Warriors SG Ball. So he was playing fullback for the Warriors SG Ball in 2020. He was playing fullback for the Auckland, it might have been Auckland Blue or Auckland Whites in the Under-20s New Zealand Rugby League Championship to start 2021. Then he went to Redcliffe for 2022, played centre for their Under-21s team. And now he's been at centre for the New South Wales Cup Warriors. Although he seemed to be playing in the halves against the Rabbitohs last weekend. Now, you can check the teams and the stats for New South Wales Cup, and there are sometimes the stats make no sense, so you got to be there's a cautionary tale there about New South Wales Cup stats, but also players are named in various positions and they don't play there at all in New South Wales Cup. I kind of think Slade Griffin loves a bit of that because he always names Leka Halasima as an edge forward. Sometimes he's playing as a middle. This weekend, for example, Keilani Going is named at lock. Halasima is named at edge forward. Considering Keilani Going has played a lot of edge forward all season, seems obvious that Halasima is going to be playing in the middle. Keilani Going is going to be playing on an edge. Small details, but it is to offer some context around Leiataua because the tries he scored last week were from the halves. So he's played fullback, he's played centre, he's played a bit of wing, he's played a bit of halves. Now he's coming into the NRL team. And I don't know where he's going to play. Like there's no certainty he's going to play any position. Because he could just play on the wing. So you can put Marcelo Montoya at centre, you can put Ali Leiataua on the wing. Adam Pompey has been playing left and right centre. So you might have Adam Pompey on the left centre to mark up against Matthew Tomoko Otahuhu Jr., who will be playing right centre for the Raiders, I think. And Jared Croker, Mr. 300, he's probably going to be playing left centre. Now, you can debate what's the easier matchup for Leiataua on debut. Tomoko was a very dynamic runner. Jared Croker isn't as dynamic, but he's probably got a bit more finesse, a bit more timing, a bit more intuition, which is a different defensive challenge. Leiataua would just be trying to tackle Tomoko. But if he's playing right centre against Jared Croker, then he's got to assess timing, he's got to assess the passing, distribution of Croker, when to jam in, when to hold, all those details that Croker has locked down as an experienced centre. So there's basically 3 different roles for Leiataua. 4 if you consider that he might play either wing or he might play either centre. So we don't really know what position Leiataua is going to play when it comes to game day, but he'll probably do a job. And it's also interesting because you can see some of the pecking order in the outside back depth chart. Braden Williami and Adam Pompey started the season. Then it went to Pompey and Williami Vailea. Then once Berry was healthy and Williami was still out injured, it was Berry and Pompey. Now Berry is out injured, and Leiataua has been playing really good footy in New South Wales Cup. Leiataua is ahead of Williami Vailea and Braden Williami. Williami because he's returning from injury, and Vailea has been playing wing and centre in New South Wales Cup. And I think they just like Leiataua better right now. He's playing better footy. Lots of depth on offer there. All those players can play wing or centre as well. So, and we've seen Andrew Webster, he loves promoting the local juniors. Sifakula, he showed a lot of faith in Tom Ale to start the season. That flowed into faith around Rocco Berry returning from injury. He came straight into the team. He gave Williami Vailea a crack. Then Sifakula made his debut. Now Leiataua's come from New South Wales Cup. And you can go down a level and look at the New South Wales Cup team, which has been bolstered by local juniors coming up from SG Ball. So we've had Jacob Laban, we've had Halasima, we've had Tanner Stowers-Smith from Christchurch, and we had Etuati Fukafuka from Auckland playing last week at hooker. So you've got 4 players who have leapt up from SG Ball to New South Wales Cup as local juniors, and you've got 2 players who have leapt up from New South Wales Cup to NRL as local juniors as well.
Yeah, well, that was actually what I was just going to ask you. Like how many they've had for moving up through like how many academy, I guess academy graduates they've had popping up in the NRL. Tane
Well,
Tuapiki as well, was he?
nah, he was recruited from Burleigh last.
Right, so he was.
Depends what academy you're talking about, because if it's the Warriors
Yeah.
Redcliffe Academy, Sifakula and Leiataua were 2 of the best under-21s players in Queensland last year, so they came through the Warriors Redcliffe Academy. Laban also played in that under-21s team, so he's pretty good. He's from the Redcliffe. Sorry, 3 players from the Warriors Redcliffe Academy. The rest of them are from, let's call it the Mount Smart Academy. How about that one? The Mount Smart Academy.
The Go Media Stadium Mountain Smart Academy.
No, this isn't the stadium. This is the academy. So it's just the Mount Smart
This is
Academy.
the yeah. I did find it buzzy a bit on the coverage the other week how because obviously the broadcasters have to act. We don't care. Like we're just going to call it Mount Smart because no one's paying us for the sponsorship, right? That's just a club thing. But obviously the broadcasters have to. I did find it funny just noticing how every commentator slash presenter seems to have a different organization of those words. Like there's Go Media Stadium, there's Go Media Mount Smart Stadium, there's Go Media Stadium Mount Smart, there's just plain old Mount Smart. There's it's a bit of a. I'm sure the sponsors will have a bit of a yarn about that, but that's their problem. I don't know. So who Raiders this week, isn't it? You said I should actually check this before I ask a question. How have the Raiders been tracking? Because they're a
Pretty
little
good.
bit.
They've
They did have a slow start though, didn't they?
Yeah, but this is again, it's we got to go deep here. Like it's not just how the Raiders tracking; it's how the Raiders tracking ahead of Jared Croker's 300th game
Mm.
in
They've
Canberra.
won 7 of their last. They round 5 they lost 53-12 to the Panthers. Since then they've gone win by win loss to the Seagulls and then win another win. So they've
Yep,
won. What did I say? 7 of 8.
they've won 7 of 8, but they've had over 40 points scored against them twice in Canberra. There was Panthers hiding. There was a Sea Eagles hiding as well,
Mm.
and they I had the stat here. The Raiders average 25.3 points conceded. The Warriors average 18.7. So this goes into the big pile of the Raiders. This goes into the Raiders hungy, the Raiders boil up. There's a lot happening here for the Raiders. They do have a winning record recently. Like your winning record you highlighted there, that comes down to 4-1 in their last 5 games as per the NRL ladder. So they have been winning games recently, but as I said, they have 2 big losses in Canberra this season. I think the Panthers put 52 points on them. Yep, 53 points.
Yeah.
And the Seagulls put 42 points on them. Home games. No team has done that to the Warriors at Mount Smart. So that's part of the equation. Also part of the equation, this is more of a quirky one. But the Warriors have had 3 crowds over 20,000 in a row. Last week it was 23,000, and they've had 4 games with at least 18,000 people at their home game in Auckland at Mount Smart Go Media Stadium. The Raiders have not had a crowd over 18,000 people at a home game this season. So we can talk about, Jared Croker, Canberra's going to come out for the big Croker 300 party. It's going to be raging. It's going to be full with emotion and lime green and all this other stuff. Will the Raiders get a bigger crowd for Jared Croker's 300th game than the Warriors get for a random old game against the Bulldogs? That's really interesting. Like, that takes a lot of different ideas. Like, Warriors attendance is fantastic. Kiwi NRL matters are popping off. Kiwi NRL attendance is going crazy across Aotearoa. Now I'm interested in, how does the Raiders celebration game attendance match up against the Warriors mundane game attendance? Because right now the Warriors can get 20,000 people for nothing. Can the Raiders get 20,000 people for Jared Croker's 300th game? I suspect so, but it's just an interesting idea to keep tucked away. Also, I mentioned the points conceded. So total, the Raiders have conceded 329 points. The Warriors have conceded 244. So that's why that's where the difference in average points conceded by each team comes in. The Raiders, though, quite a funky attacking team because they're good at offloads and they're good at dummy half running. So I'd say they have less structure to their attack than a team like the Warriors, which makes it hard to like measure the defensive effort, because we've had some really good matchups recently with the Warriors, specifically the Broncos, but other different tactical battles where the Warriors have been able to nullify what the other team does well. How do you stop the Raiders? It's responding and reacting to an offload. Maybe limiting the offload, but you can't set up your defensive line. You might, tighten things up to stop their dummy half running, but there's only so much you can do when a team like the Raiders, they get into contact, then they get an offload out. Now they're spinning it to another good footy player who has all the skill. I think the defensive focus there is more like reacting to the offload, reacting to what's happening, keeping your feet moving, keeping your eyes up, engaged in what's happening, as opposed to we're going to employ this defensive scheme to stop this. The Raiders are more of a funky attacking team where Rapin is going to bounce over here, bounce over there, bounce over there. Tomoko's busting tackles. Papali'i's storming up the guts with an offload. I think that's how the Raiders can blow other teams away. Because if you're not moving your feet, if you're not responding to where the footy is, they're going to score points on you. Thing about the Raiders is the Tigers almost beat them last week. In the last 5 minutes. We've also seen home games where they have been absolutely destroyed. The Raiders have one more win than the Warriors. They might be a better team than the Warriors, but the Warriors haven't been blown away by a team at home or away, I don't really think, this season. So it's a fascinating matchup, especially given how the Warriors performed against the Dolphins, because as I finish up here, the Warriors against the Dolphins, they just ground them down. Grit, determination, completions, tackling, mana. If you do that against the Raiders, you're going to go a long way to diminishing the effect of the crowd, of the occasion. If you just settle into the grind, you're going to see if the Raiders can maintain the energy and the emotion throughout 60 minutes, throughout 80 minutes. And I think that's what the Warriors do well. I think that is also an area of weakness for the Canberra Raiders.
Yeah, just on the Warriors' home defense, they, I don't know, should I count the games around the country as well? I might as well, just for extra info. It's the first round one in Sky Stadium, they conceded 12 points in a win against the Knights. Mount Smart 16-14 against the Bulldogs, a win, so 12-14. 22-14 against North Queensland at Mount Smart, 14 points again. 14 points conceded to the Roosters as well, which was a loss, a 14-0 loss, but still, keeping the team under 20. That was a magic round. That doesn't count. Then we've got at McLean Park, it was 22-26, lost to the Broncos, but that's not Mount Smart. Then at Mount Smart, 30-8 against the Dolphins. So they haven't conceded more than, what was the most there? 16 points? Um, 14. They haven't conceded more than 14 points in a game at Mount Smart this season, which not all of them have been wins, but oh no, they where was I? What was the Roosters score? Was that 14-0? Anyway, yes, it was 14-0. So they haven't all been wins, but there's been zero blowouts there. There's been nothing that got out of control or anything like that. It's just been a couple of the games they haven't been able to keep up scoring, but defensively at home, pretty flawless. Like that's a fantastic record, and it's a bit strange that the Raiders, who like you, you've won 7 out of 8, but the game immediately preceding that you conceded 50 points and lost at home, which admittedly against the reigning champs, but then the other loss in the middle of that streak is conceding 40 odd points to a team that's hovering at home again, a team that's not currently in the top 8 at all. And the Raiders do have a minus 49 points differential, which is the worst of any team in the top 8 currently as it stands. So it's I don't know, it's a bit of a weird anomaly there, because you can't just say as well they started slow. Yeah, they did, but that's not where the points differential damage has been done. It's been done in the 2 most recent losses, really, which is just, I don't know, an odd thing for what's clearly a very good team and some pretty good form as well, but strange. So the NRL is strange, though. They serve up these things all the time in the sport.
Well, they've been winning games. Like, it's hard to say. I don't know. I think the Warriors can spoil the party. That's what I'm saying. The Warriors can show up there and win the game. Like, they don't have to do anything crazy. They don't have to be playing 10 out of 10 footy. The Warriors can just go about their footy as long as they're up for the physical battle. The thing about the Raiders is they've been winning games. They've got a good record. But as we've repeated a few different times, they're conceding 25 points a game.
Mm.
And the Warriors can score 25 points. And the Warriors can beat you up.
And the Warriors usually don't concede 25 points.
The Warriors can grind you down. The Warriors can outkick you with Sean Johnson. The Warriors can... They don't even need a kick. We saw against the Dolphins. Like, they just get in 10 meters, turn the ball over, start whacking blokes in defense. It's a recipe. It's a style of footy that isn't just perfectly suited to an away game in Canberra, because both places are freaking cold at the moment. It's also perfectly suited to a celebration game. This will be one of the biggest NRL games of the year for the community of Canberra, for the Raiders, whānau, for everyone involved. Everyone loves Jared Croker. The Warriors also have a couple of Canberra folk in their team. Shans Nickel-Klokstad. Funnily enough, he is in similar form. I said on the variety show, better form than he was in 2019 during the Canberra Raiders grand final push. Mitchell Barnett is also... He started his career with the Raiders before he went to the Knights. So he might be returning to play in front of friends and whānau. And if he's operating on extra mana, that's a scary proposition for Mitch Barnett, because he's a ruckus dude. Also, Andrew McFadden, he is the one overseeing all these young talent coming through. He's the one developing the SG Ball team to come into New South Wales Cup and all that stuff. Warriors signed him from Canberra, who signed him from the Warriors. So there are a few Canberra Raiders tentacles to watch out for, specifically Nickel-Klokstad. Because I love Sebastian Kris. Like, he's fantastic. I love all the Canberra Raiders Kiwi NRL players. Sebastian Kris, Matthew Tomoko, Joseph Tapine. Ata Mariota's not in the team. He's from Manurewa. Kuri Harawira Naira's hopefully on his recovery trail as well. But Shans Nickel-Klokstad could still be the starting fullback for Canberra Raiders. Like, when he left, it was about Xavier Savage taking over with his speed and his, more guile. Well, he's not the starting fullback right now. Sebastian Kris is, because Sebastian Kris is trusted by Ricky Stewart to handle all the basic duties of fullback. Like, the Raiders would be a better team with Nickel-Klokstad at fullback. But he's with the Warriors now, and he's in career best form, and I think he's going to be on fire returning to Canberra. So he's someone to watch out for. Mitchell Barnett will be absolutely looking to destroy some Canberra Raiders forwards. And this throws up one last interesting thing for me about the game from the performance for the Warriors. Because we have seen them, let's say, manipulate the middle a few times against different teams. We've seen it twice against the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs, who have Cameron Ciraldo, Panthers defensive guru, who has had his middle forward group destroyed by the Warriors 2 games this season. We've also seen it in 2 wins over the Cowboys, where the Warriors, whether it's passing between Dylan Walker, Tohu Harris, Adam Fanua-Blake, or against the Dolphins, there was a lot more Wade Egan craft around dummy half, running out of dummy half, having support players beside him, just wiggling out this way, creeping back that way. His mahi around the ruck has been fantastic. It was especially fantastic against the Dolphins. Also against the Dolphins, you saw more of Marata Niukore running short balls at Isaiah Katoa. Now, he's not going to be doing that against Jack Whiten. I don't think anyone would like to run a short ball at Jack Whiten. But prior to that, when there hasn't been such a blatant target for Niukore to run at, there's a lot of turning him back into the middle. So instead of running on Sean Johnson's outside shoulder, he's running back on his inside shoulder towards the middle. There's no Dylan Walker for this game, but I think you're still going to see the passing of Tohu Harris, especially shifting the footy. But I think now you're going to see the Warriors revert back to those inside lines to help work over the Raiders' middle, because that is a strength of the Raiders' team. Josh Papali'i, Wellington's Joseph Tapine, Corey Horsburgh is fantastic. Even their edge forwards are pretty good. Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead, Emre Gould is going to come off the bench. He's a massive dude. Pasami Saulo is also big and mobile. So the strength for the Raiders is their forward pack, but the Warriors have different ways to work over a forward pack. They can do it with their passing and manipulate space with Dylan Walker, but they can also do it. They've also got other passes to do it without Dylan Walker, and they have little tactics like Niukore running back into the middle, Jackson Ford bouncing this way, bouncing that way, Nickel Klokstad taking hit-ups in the middle, bit of footwork, repeat carries in a set of 6 to just challenge the middle. The more you challenge a middle while also executing your grind, the more fatigue sets in and you can start to execute your plays better later in the game. I hammer that home because the Raiders have a really good forward pack, and it's something we have seen the Warriors do against different teams each week. And when they haven't won games, it's been because the other team had some better tactics, had a better plan in place. The Broncos, they condensed everything. They just started cluttering and stunting the Warriors' attacking motions. I think back to the Roosters win, that must have been your 14-0 result in Auckland. It was pissing down with rain. The Roosters just tightened up. They had a bigger team, and they just executed wet weather footy better than the Warriors. It would be nice if Dylan Walker was playing, but that is balanced out by Nickel Klokstad coming back to Canberra, Luke Metcalf playing his 3rd game in a row. Maybe he's got a bit more confidence, let alone Fanua-Blake taking the challenge against Papali'i and Tapine a bit personally as well. Like, there's plenty of reason to think that the Warriors can still figure out some sort of plan to work over the Raiders' middle. And if they do, that's where you see more space for Sean Johnson. That's where you're going to see the overlaps out on the flanks. That might be what generates space for Ali Leiataua to get busy, as we've seen him do in New South Wales Cup.
Yeah, I, for one, am definitely looking forward to the Shans Nickel Klokstad revenge game. That's minimum 250 running meters in that, surely. I mean, Good to see as well that Webster's sort of like, I like him coming out nice and early and saying like, yeah, we signed Tui Shek, but this dude is our fullback going forward next season and beyond, sort of thing. I mean, they're onto a good. I thought he was as good as he's been all season last week, and he's been pretty good all season. So now he's playing against his old team who cut him loose, maybe a little bit prematurely, a little bit slightly. I mean, I don't know. It's like, was there more of a story to that? Because it is
Yeah,
interesting that
like
the dude that was starting ahead of him is now on the extended bench, not actually playing.
you mentioned revenge. I think that's too strong a word. Like Nickel Clockstar probably, I think he just wanted to come back to Auckland. His whānau's here. Like it makes sense for him.
Right.
He,
And then maybe you move on from a guy who's not committed long term at
like
some point, sort of.
he was like Savage was starting ahead of him at the Raiders last season, but he obviously didn't take his opportunity. Like he did, he was starting earlier in the season, but then he got injured. I don't know what's happening, but this is another thing. So why is Chris the fullback now? He's a big body, makes his meters, doesn't make many errors. He's probably a very vocal fullback for the defense as well. This is what we've talked about all season long. Dylan Edwards at the Panthers, Clint Gutherson at the Eels, Hayes Perham at the Bulldogs. I love what he's doing there because he is consistently one of the best players for the Bulldogs. It's not like he is the best player one week, sucks the next week, then he's the best player this week as some of the other Bulldogs. But Hayes Perham is consistently a top 3 player for the Bulldogs. And that is because he's at fullback, he's covering the kicks, he's taken 20 runs a game. And when it's Adokar scored a try off the scrum as he had done against the Warriors. Quick shift to him, get him on the outside, later bolt. It's Hayes Perham who throws the last pass to put him in space. It's Hayes Perham who's putting in a grubber to get a repeat set because Matt Burton's on the other side of the field. Like Hayes Perham is doing a very good job as one of these kind of fullbacks in the NRL. Nickel Clockstad is that type of fullback. Xavier Savage isn't that type of fullback. Xavier Savage is speed, he's X factor, he's pizzazz. He's like a less good version of Reece Walsh. Reece Walsh is, and the Broncos love errors. The Broncos are first for errors right now. I know that for certain because I checked this morning, but we'll double check here. The Broncos are first for errors. Let's see. We know Reece Walsh is top 5. We know Selwyn Cobbo's top 5. The Broncos are first for errors. 160 errors this season. Eels have 150. The Broncos' defense and their hyper aggression and their energy, their intensity is good enough to make up for those errors. Other teams don't have that hyper aggression that the Broncos have. A team like the Warriors, you want to limit the errors. Like, I think a fundamental element of Warriors' success is limit the errors, because errors and Warriors don't go well together. Funnily enough, the Warriors are 15th for errors. The Panthers are 17th. The Storm are 14th. That is the area that the Warriors exist in for errors.
So the leading team, well, there's Penrith and Brisbane are tied for first. Like Brisbane have played 2 extra games. They're 10-4. Penrith are 8-4. Both have 20 points though. So the 2 teams tied for first. One is leading in errors and one is last in errors.
And that tells you all you need to know about how they play their footy. Like it's not good or bad. It's just how different teams play their footy. The Broncos have so much energy behind their footy that they can absorb all those errors. I don't know if it's sustainable, but I've been wrong about that already to start this season. Also kind of chilling out on the Dylan Brown as the better number 6 versus Kalen Ponga. Got to say that. We just got to put that out there right now. But I was, I don't think I'm wrong about that, but that is a bit of housekeeping. Also housekeeping. I am cautious about my opinion about the Broncos, but they're making up for all their errors with everything else they do. As we saw when they played in Napier, it's Ezra Mam on one edge, Adam Reynolds on the other. It's Herbal Farnworth on one edge, Katoni Staggs on the other edge, Kurt Capewell, Jordan Ricky. Then you chuck in their Origin players, and they're fantastic. That's not the Warriors, because the Warriors are under Andrew Webster. They're trying to be more like the Panthers. And when I say they're trying to be like the Panthers, Webster's come from the Panthers, and he's just rolled out some basic Panthers footy things in the Warriors system. They do their own thing as well, but it's the general recipe. That means don't make many errors, turn the ball over down their end of the field, smash them up with your forwards, because when they kick, it's our backline who gets the ball up to halfway. We turn the ball down their end again, we repeat it. And that's what's working for the Warriors. That is what has worked for the Panthers, because when you turn the ball over down their end of the field and you've got one of your backs running at James Fisher-Harris and Moses Leiataua, it's not going to work out well for you. You're going to get smashed. And I think that's basically what the Warriors are trying to do as well. And that recipe, yeah, as I'm thinking through it, that recipe is, I think it's well suited to a game in Canberra against the Raiders, big occasion. Because if the Warriors came with it's basically, do you want to be a mediocre version of the Panthers or the Broncos, right? That's how we're framing this.
Yeah, the two extremes.
Yeah,
if the
Warriors are going to Canberra as a mediocre version of the Broncos, I think that's what the Raiders love. They love helter-skelter. They love the energy and intensity, a little bit of niggle. And that's what worked against the Tigers as well. But if you get into that sort of contest, you're inviting the other team into the game, because there's always opportunities. There are high-energy encounters. The ball's moving everywhere. Maybe that tires you out. I don't know. But the Warriors are a mediocre version of the Panthers, and I think that is better suited to these type of games where it's just complete your sets, play down their end of the field, roll out our attacking structures, but I don't know how to describe it. As an individual, don't go outside our structure with your own bit of razzle-dazzle. Like, you'll have time and space to do your razzle-dazzle, but we don't need you running like a lone wolf type of thing. Like, we're just here to go through our process, to go through our plan, keep it calm, keep it somewhat humble, turn the ball down their end of the field, whack them in defense, nickel clock start, Watane-Zesniak, so on and so forth. And I think that is a nice recipe for an away game in Canberra.
Yeah, there we go. So I can't really, I shan't explain this, but for those like clued up on their mythology, basically the Panthers are Apollo and the Broncos are Dionysus, which I'm sure there's some nice YouTube videos to follow that dynamic, but that's like, yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to explain it, look it up, but that's the Apollo versus Dionysus thing, the Panthers versus the Broncos.
And for folks listening, for folks watching, I've got no idea what he's talking about either.
That's why I said look it up, yeah.
Any other areas of intrigue? Like, I don't know, we've done a fair amount of Warriors talk that did encompass some other NRL teams. Good explanation of what the Panthers and Broncos are doing well. Not much doing with your Dragons versus Rabbitohs, although, just quickly, it is the Saliva Havili Derby. Manuel Marlins Jr., former Warriors player, left the Warriors to go to the Dragons, and he's returning for the Rabbitohs. I think he is a really important player for the Rabbitohs because he does cover hooker off the bench, but now Saliva Havili is playing as a middle forward for the Rabbitohs. So he's a very powerful, quick, skillful middle forward that a lot of NRL teams need, that a lot of NRL teams have, except for the Dragons. They don't have that type of player. What do you have any ideas of like the Dragons are a mediocre version of this team? I've said that the Warriors are a mediocre version of the Panthers. Um, I'll, I kind of think the Dragons might be a mediocre version of the Broncos. Just they always like throughout their turmoil, the Dragons have always shown up to beat up teams. I think that's always been the case. Like you're going to get smashed, but you'll probably win the game. That feels a bit like the Broncos, and they're just not as good as the Broncos. Any other ideas there?
Well, I think over time they've been both of those things. Like there was definitely the Wayne Bennett championship era was definitely
Yeah,
more
well,
on the
that's
Panthers
10
side of
years ago.
things,
Like, what are we
but
doing right now?
it's
Like, what's
more
happening?
than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But for a long time that shadow hung over, and they were the team that just played very tight, very like few mistakes, get through your sets, kick well, but constantly told they don't have enough sort of flash and pizzazz. And I think that's something they've tried to build up in recent years to where they've tried to get more like the Broncos, hired an ex-Broncos coach, signed a bunch of ex-Broncos players. None of them except for one of them were any good, but it's the first dude they signed, Ben Hun, who's still hanging around. But I mean, I'm not sure they know what they are at the moment. I think you're right. They're probably a bit more on that Broncos side, but I don't think they have a very clear identity. So I think that makes it a bit hard to judge. I mean, they don't even have a coach at the moment. So what do you
Yeah.
know?
Um, I the Raiders have conceded 329 points. The Dragons in dead last have also conceded 329 points. So shout out to
it's
defense.
the NRL stats we've had in this episode are nuts. What a league.
Um,
What a league.
Rightio. Any other rugby league matters that you want to ask me about?
Any other rugby league matters you wanted to talk about?
Not particularly. There are some junior things I will touch on the email newsletter tomorrow. Obviously, Dylan Brown isn't playing at the moment. He's been stood down. So that's all good. No, that seems like there's a lot of really good, cool games, a lot of fun games happening. Junior Pong is still on the wing for the Roosters, which is good for him. He gets another opportunity. But yeah, I'll be breaking down a lot of the junior stuff. Most of the intrigue is in the junior stuff this week. Obviously, still be watching a lot of NRL footy as well. Let's crack into NBL basketball. Corey Webster signing with the Canterbury Rams. Is he going to be playing this week? They play on Sunday, maybe? No, on Sunday against the Nelson Giants. So that is a bit of a local derby there. Do you have any word on if Corey Webster is going to be playing for the Canterbury Rams? Let's remind folks, Ty Webster, he is joining or has joined the Otago Nuggets. Otago Nuggets have 2 games this weekend. While I'm on a roll, I'll just share the top 4. Canterbury Rams are first. Auckland Tuatara are second. Otago Nuggets are third. Franklin Bulls are fourth. They all have at least 7 wins. One team has 6 wins, the Wellington Saints, who are on the rise, as you highlighted in the variety show. So you've basically got the Webster brothers joining 2 of the 3 best teams, which I'm sure every other team loves. But it will be like Corey Webster joining the Canterbury Rams is fantastic. We've talked a bit about Taylor Britt and what he does as a table setting point guard, but if you get Corey Webster, but a Max Darling, he had a massive dunk last weekend, and some of those other Canterbury Rams role players, I think Corey Webster's addition will be epic. Same with Ty Webster coming up for the Otago Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, is the what you said there about the other teams looking up and seeing the top teams just grabbing like Tall Blacks level starters. Guts. They're already better than you, and now they're even better on top of that. I think the Rams have done a bit more reshuffling too. They've signed an import big man to replace Ty Wynyard, and then they had to cut an import sort of wing to make room for him. Can't remember the dude's name, but he moved to I think Taranaki instead, and therefore, well, we've lost that guy. We need to find a local who can fill that spot. Oh, Corey Webster. What do you know? Just grab this dude. So I believe because the reason the Websters are both popping up is because they want to get some reps in ahead of the World Cup. Basically, like that's the priority is to be match fit for the Tall Blacks World Cup in August, and so to play the NBL playoffs, you have to have played at least 5 games in the regular season. So, from what I have read, it sounds like those two will both pop up for the last 5 games. Like they won't play before that. They're not quite ready to go this weekend. It means they won't be playing next weekend, but it means they will be playing the week after that, which is the 22nd. And what's the game on Thursday, the 22nd? It's the Canterbury Rams against the Otago Nuggets. So you've got the Webster Bros' first games will be against each other. And then at the end of that, they'll go play with each other at the World Cup for the Tall Blacks and then play alongside each other again for the Perth Wildcats in the Aussie NBL season. With Ty Webster, there's like a shared ownership between the Otago Nuggets and the Perth Wildcats, which is how that's been set up. With Corey Webster, I think the link would have been Judd Flavel, who's coach of the Rams and obviously was a long time Breakers assistant and an assistant with the Tall Blacks. So someone who has worked a lot with Corey Webster throughout his career. And, you know, get on the phone to the fella. We need a new local guard who can score some points, and you are the best one available by far. Like, what do you reckon? Get some 5 games in, plus maybe a couple playoffs heading into that Tall Blacks tour. You reckon? Yeah, sweet as. There we go. But yeah, the way that it worked out for the Rams versus the Nuggets in that game is that's some blockbuster television right there.
But they're not playing this weekend and will stay present with what's happening this weekend. 2 games for the Otago Nuggets, one of which is against the Wellington Saints, which seems like a very important encounter. That is a Friday night game. I think it's in Wellington. How are you feeling
both
about
away for the Nuggets this week?
How are you feeling about that matchup? Anything intrigue you there? Specific players, local ballers? Following up with your Wellington Saints notes from the variety show, what's happening there?
Well, it's an interesting week, isn't it? Because that's a double header basically. The Nuggets play Manawatu away on Thursday tonight, and then it was the other one, the Saints on Friday night, also away. They've lost 3 games in a row, I think. So I'm just checking to find the oh, that's no good. I was just checking to find the what do you call the status reports, and because I think one of the major reasons the Nuggets have slipped up, I think that first game, their first defeat was a bit like just one of those ones that was due at some point. They were just going to have an off night. I think the 2 games since then, they've been decidedly kind of not the team they were. And clearly a big factor in that is Ja'Cory McLaughlin, their import guard, not being available with a knee injury. It says here on the thing that he's out again for at least the Jets game, but if he's out for the Jets game, I'm guessing he's probably not playing the game after that either. So it's a difficult little spell for the Nuggets. This isn't really where they wanted to have a doubleheader with their best dude out injured. They actually play the Rams next week as well. And then they play the Rams. They play the Rams at home next week, and then they play the Rams away the week after. So once Ty Webster gets back and Ja'Cory McLaughlin gets back, they're going to be in a good place. But whether they can get a home semi-final or not might well depend on what they can do, like whether they can pick up a win in one of these 2 games when they are going to be under strength. And that's not an easy thing to do. The Jets have dropped a few games lately, but they've been pretty sharp. And yeah, the Wellington Saints have won 4 in a row and looking excellent. And at some point, I don't know if it's this week or next week, but at some point Isaiah Leiataua will be back as well, and they'll take it to another level. And the Saints have been up and down. Well, they've not been. Well, they were down and now they're up. Basically, they started poorly and now they've getting quite good. They score a lot of points. The Nuggets are the best defensive team, but they're missing their top scorer, and that's been something that's struggling for them. Like they're it's a tricky couple games for them, but the Saints in particular
Just quickly,
are the
like,
team that should be poised to take advantage of that. Because if the Nuggets do drop a few things, the Saints might well be ahead of them by the end of this week. You know.
so none of the Wellington Saints' recent victories have come with Leiataua playing. He's still yet to join the Wellington Saints.
No, he played a little bit before
Then he went
they
away.
yeah, and then he went away and then came back. So I think the first couple of they certainly didn't play the last two games. Let me just check the didn't play the one before that, and the first one of the streak was against Southland, and he didn't play that one either. So yeah, I don't think he's actually been part of the winning streak. Coincidentally enough,
What's been a major factor for Wellington? Like, because Tommy Vodanovic isn't in any of the like the stat leaders. Like, he's not exactly in the Hiram Harris zone where he's just up to his neck in every single stat, which is why we love Hiram Harris, because he's just heavily involved in everything in a game of basketball. Tommy Vodanovic isn't in that zone right now, so I'm curious, is there like a, you always talk about the imports, respect to the imports, but is there a Kiwi player in the Wellington Saints who has been kind of instrumental in this recent rise up the NBL rankings?
well, the most instrumental player has been their Aussie guard Kyle Adnan, but with minimum like 20 points, 10 assists minimum per game, pretty much these days. But they have a few like. It's a little bit of a rotation. It's little bit like who's going to step up this on this occasion. Tom Vodanovic has had a couple big games. Overall, I would say it's not. I don't know. It's not been the impact from him I would necessarily expect. I think he's been a little down overall, but he has certainly had games where he's shown what he can do. And then if it's not him, maybe maybe Tane Samuel off the bench might chip in with some points and rebounds. But actually, the last couple games it's been Toy Smith Milner, who I think he had which was the game? It was the win over the Nelson Giants. He shot 5 of 5 from 3 point. And I'm just looking at the thing. He shot 2 of 2 from 3 pointers in the game after that. So, and I better check, he was 0 of 5 from 3 pointers in the game before. So he was 0 of 5 one game, and since then he's 7 of 7 in the next two games combined. Like that's pretty helpful. That's not a dude who's just hanging on the edge looking for threes as well. Like that's a big dude, power forward / center, who is giving you that kind of shooting range.
And
that's a nice balance to have in your team.
He is third for overall 3-point percentage, 47.5. Daryl Woodson, he seems like an import.
Yeah, that's
he is second,
Nelson, I think.
47.7. And then you've got Kaya Isaac. He
Really?
is leading 3-point percentage. From Canterbury. And he's got 14 minutes per game. He is shooting 3.1 attempts per game, 50%. So he's basically landing 1.5 3-pointers a game. That might go up if you're getting Corey Webster to pass you the ball. Like, if Corey Webster's driving, popping it out to space, and you got Kaya Isaac there, who I am assuming, mad respect, I'm assuming he's a local Aotearoa product. Sorry, Kaya Isaac is from Sydney. He's an Australian.
He is, but I did do some research on this fella because he had a couple big. He's sort of come into more prominence in the last couple of weeks. He wasn't a big factor earlier on. I think Taylor Britt got injured, and then it was him and Quinn Clinton had to split some point guard duties. Isaac can also play out on the wing a bit more. And will likely do that more often when Corey Webster's in town, I would imagine. But he was born and raised in Sydney, and he's played some like age grade stuff there. But if you check out his Twitter profile, it classes himself in his bio as New Zealand Cook Islands. So there you go. I assume he counts as a local in that case. well, you wouldn't be paying a young project point guard player to be an import. So
There
stacks
you go.
up.
Shout out to him. Um, just quickly, finally, we'll touch on. We've got the Tuatara and yeah, just the Tuatara Rams. Who are your top four teams here?
Franklin Bulls would be the other
Franklin
one.
Bulls. So you got Tuatara versus Franklin. So any bits in the Tuatara versus Franklin game that you're tracking? Did we have a quasi LeBron James retirement from Rob Lowe?
Yeah, yeah, we did. I'm not sure what that means because it's trying to find out as much information as I could on that from the various reports, but it does sound like the Breakers did offer him a new deal. He also had better offers from elsewhere, but he didn't want to go overseas again. He'd if you remember, Rob Lowe had a worse time than most of it during the pandemic stuff because his wife was pregnant at the time and he wanted to come back, and then the Breakers like shafted him and told him when he went back there was that report saying that he wouldn't play again for the Breakers that season, which was weird. This was pre Modi Mayor days, so when everything was quite chaotic. Well, he was there, but he wasn't running the show, and yeah, he did have a nice bounce back season last year. It was really good. He's definitely good enough to keep playing at this level. I did have him in my Tall Black squad for the World Cup. I don't know what this means because the retirement only specifically says he's not playing NBL anymore. He's not going to be professional basketball. But does that mean he's going to the World Cup, or does that mean he's retired from internationals as well? There doesn't seem to be, at least yet, no one has quite said that. Maybe maybe in that game, someone get a microphone in his face and find out one way or another. Because as I said, I would have had him in my 12 for the World Cup for the Tall Blacks, so I'd see how that goes. But Franklin do also play on Sunday night away to the Hawks, so that's a back to back for them as well. Whereas for the Tuatara, it's not. They've got a week to prepare for that game, and it should be a big one. But I don't know. I love how Rob Lowe's playing this year. Frankly, think he's probably the MVP of the league so far. And I love how the Tuatara themselves have been playing, and they should get a couple of their younger dudes back, like Beatty and Dalton. I don't think played last week because they were doing the National Under-19s tournament. A couple of teams were obviously affected by that as well because there are a few very good players who have been getting some in that age range who've been getting some NBL minutes. But yeah, I love what the Tuatara have been doing, and I kind of think they'll have a bit too much for Franklin in that, particularly Franklin on the wrong side of a back to back. But I mean, it's close at the top of the table there. It's hard to judge, and these teams have been able to beat each other consistently throughout the thing. So yeah, that's game of the round right there. I'd hasten to say.
Big up Rob Lowe. He's not on the 3-point percentage. Might just have to check his. How's he shooting threes this season?
He's normally pretty sharp with them, but he's also doing everything else this year. Like he's the leading dude in terms of blocks, and he's right up there in rebounds. So I think maybe he's playing a bit closer to the rim more often for this particular team. I don't know.
Just try to get some stats there. 3-point percentage 35.4, shooting 4.8.
It's still respectable.
Healthy for a big man. Not quite of Kaya Isaac standards, but up there. And that'll be us for the Niche Cast. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, tap in with all things Niche Cast. Sorry, and the Niche Case generally. Tap in.
The whole lot.
The whole lot. And the Niche Cast. And then just enjoy Aotearoa. Enjoy Aotearoa sport. Enjoy your own company. Enjoy the friends and whānau as well. How about that one? Big up yourself. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Churcher.